If you haven't lived under a rock for the past month, you have probably witnessed the meteoric rise of a certain horse girl related gacha game. Be it on Twitter, Instagram, or even Twitch, this game has seemingly hit a popularity that no other gacha game has before. Even the most staunch opponents of these types of games have buckled, and all types of streamers who otherwise wouldn't have touched the game with a 10-foot pole gave this game a try, and actually turned out to like it. But that's not the only way this game stands out. Many other gacha games have quite toxic fanbases, always having to compare their favorite characters with each other. But that is seemingly not so much the case in Uma Musume. In fact, it is quite sweet to see the Japanese player base share fun facts and cute stories about their favorite horse girl with the new international players. You see, before June there was no English release of the game. For the past 4 years, the game was basically only available in Japanese and a bit later in Korean and Chinese. Despite that, it is still in the top 10 all-time highest grossing gacha games worldwide and still regularly cracks the top 20 of the monthly gacha earnings, despite it being a 4-year-old game. And for that reason, I, like many of you I might imagine, wanted to give the game a try. However, that alone wasn't enough for me. You see, I am the type of person that really wants to immerse himself in whatever type of media they get into. So I set out on a quest to watch all mainstream anime of the series, to get a feel for the characters and the world they live in. But while many other gacha tie-in anime range from mediocre to quite bad, I feel like Uma Musume is the exception to that rule. Thai Games has used the seemingly infinite money they have gotten from the gacha to produce an anime that, at its best, competes for being the best sports anime of all time. Now, before I continue, some of you might be wondering why you want a person like me, someone who hasn't actually been a fan for a long time, to tell you how to get into the series. And while that is a valid point, let me present you an alternative way to view it. Because I only got into the series 2 months ago, everything about it is still very much fresh in my mind, to the point where I can easily give you a lot of information about it. Now, before getting into the game, or the anime for that matter, I think there's one important thing that everyone should know about if they don't already do. And it's not the amazing action, the cute character interactions, or the banging soundtrack. It's the historical context of the series. When talking about most other franchises, the so-called source material is more often than not considered to be the superior version. Whether it be when an anime adapts a manga, light novel, or visual novel, the original is generally considered to be the best way to experience the story. However, for Uma Musume, this clear hierarchical divide between the anime, the manga, and the game doesn't really exist, because, as you might or might not know, the thing they're all based off, the source material of the series, if you will, are actual horse races, actual real-life horses. And while the series isn't always 100% accurate, nothing ever is, its historical accuracy is often almost a bit scary. The most obvious place to see this are the race results. The anime regularly recreates the real-life race results one-to-one, showcasing some of the most iconic and memorable moments in Japanese horse racing history. Not only that, it also often includes real racing commentary snippets, recreating not only the race result itself, but also the reaction to it. However, that is only scratching the surface of how dedicated the staff over at Thai Games was to properly bringing the lives and careers of these horses to the screen. The horses and the respective anime characters don't just share a name. Anime girl represents the horse she represents with every facet of her being. The most obvious place where this can be seen is the design. Every part of an Uma Musume's design is in some way, shape or form related to the actual horse's appearance, with it reflecting either the color of the mane, the racing outfits, or the outfits of the racers. But some details are more hidden, like the side which their ear accessories are on, telling us the gender of the real-life horse. But even the Uma Musume's relationships with each other reflect real life. Girls are close to each other in the anime, chances are they are blood related in real life. Take for example Teo and Simile Rudolph, Special Week and Silent Suzuka, or Majiro Queen and Goldship. The exact same can also be said about the rivalries featured in the anime. And as if that weren't enough, even the Uma Musume's personalities are based on the actual horses' personalities. For example, Oguri Cap's infinite appetite, Haru Urara's unbroken fighting spirit, or Goldship's mischievous nature are all things taken from real life. This not only includes their overall personalities, but even some small events that might appear to happen somewhat out of left field are events that actually happened to the real life horses. The biggest example of this is the so-called 12 billion yen incident. In it, Goldship tried fighting another horse at the beginning of the race, causing him to miss the start and then lose the race, which cost the people betting on the race a total of 12 billion yen, something that is referenced in a scene in the anime. However, as interesting as the history behind the horses is, and as much as me and many others are interested in learning about all the small and fascinating little tidbits, to tell you the truth, they are not in any way a requirement to watching the anime or playing the game. In fact, if you just want to jump into the game right away, be my guest. There's nothing I can do to stop you, and it's also a perfectly valid way to experience the series. However, if you like me, want to get into the series via the anime, I will be sharing my experience and recommendation as to how and in what order to do that. The reason why this is even an interesting question to pose in the first place is the following. Uma Musume's anime is structured in a way where, due to having different protagonists, basically no season is required viewing for any of its sequels. They do, of course, have some of the same cast, sometimes they reference events of other seasons, but if you, for example, watch Season 2 without watching Season 1, you aren't missing out on that much. That naturally opens up the question of which anime to start with. But in most other shows, there's a pretty set order in which to watch their entries. The disconnected nature of Uma Musume's entries allows for some degree experimentation. While I assume that most people that plan on watching all of the season anyways would just watch them in release order, this question is much more interesting for folks who aren't sure about the series yet and want a good entry to get them hooked. Naturally, the first and most obvious option to start the anime is Season 1. It's a natural starting point for anyone who really wants to get into the series, even besides just the most obvious reason, it being the first entry. Season 1 perfectly explains and introduces the viewer to the rules and customs of the Uma Musume world, whether it be the races, the idol performances, or the nature of the Umas. The ground rules of the world and the series are being laid out here. Story beats and character arcs do feel a bit simple at times, but maybe that's by design. Featuring a good mix of action, comedy, and a bit of drama, the season is a very easy watch for people who are unfamiliar with the series or even the genre as a whole. The series also does well in setting up the cast for future seasons, giving us a small teaser and introduction to some of the most iconic characters the series has to offer. However, I do not think Season 1 is flawless by any means. In fact, and this might be a bit controversial, I think it is one of the weaker entries of the series. Not bad by any means, but it does feel like a very by the books and conventional series, following some very common plot beats, not really offering a lot of new stuff to go along with it. Additionally, I do think due to it being Season 1, the series directors weren't quite sure about the exact direction the show would go in, to the point where you sometimes might not know whether it's supposed to be sports anime, slice of life anime, or an idol anime. Nonetheless, I do think it's a very good starting point, and if you enjoy Season 1, you're practically guaranteed to like everything that follows. For the next entry, B&W no Chikai, I debated not even putting it on this list. It's only a 3-episode OVA that is clearly meant to be watched after Season 1, so initially I thought there would be no good reason for this to be the first anime entry to watch. However, the more that I thought about it, the more I realized that I don't really agree with that assessment anymore. It is true that it's meant to be watched after Season 1, and it's also true that it's only 3 episodes. However, the second part is what makes it a decent option for being your first introduction to the series. If you're still unsure about watching the series at all, then it might be easier to watch something that's only 3 episodes, which still gives you an idea about what Uma Musume is about in essence. So if that applies to you, or if you're more of a fan of the slice of life side of things, watching the OVA first might be something worth considering. Season 2 is a season that many fans still consider to be the peak of what Uma Musume has to offer, and for good reason. It's still unmatched in its emotional impact, featuring some of the best character moments of the series. It feels like a natural progression of Season 1, featuring better animation, higher stakes, and higher emotional investment. However, watching Season 1 is not at all required to enjoy the seasons. All the arcs in it are fully self-contained. Chikai Teo's arc in particular is so grand and epic that if it didn't also happen in real life, you would criticize the authors for how unrealistic those events were. But while the two main characters, Chikai Teo and Michiru McQueen, obviously take up most of the screen time, it's not like the other characters are just pushed to the side and ignored. In fact, despite it being less ensemble focused than Season 1, it feels like Season 2 gives the side characters more character development. Team Canopus with its quirky members and Rice Shower with her heartbreaking arc almost steal the show from the two main characters. If you love sports with all of its ups and downs, injuries and comebacks, and the emotional journey that goes along with it all, as well as some well-earned and emotional character development, then Season 2 is perfect for you. It's a season where Uma Musume fully commits to being a sports anime and never looks back, and they couldn't have done it better than with this. Now, if my comments about the quality of Season 1 ruffled some feathers, then my comments regarding Season 3 are surely gonna piss some people off. First of all, I do want to mention that Season 3 is still not bad. It's just by far the weakest entry of the series, in my opinion. Kita-san Black, in real life, was one of the most dominant and accomplished Japanese racehorses. He had no real issues with injuries, and apart from losing a few times to Durament in the first few races, also didn't really have any rivals. So when the anime studio decided to make Kita-san Black the underdog in the story, it was quite surprising to say the least. So, although the character designs were on point as always, and the character interactions were still awesome, the story itself felt a bit flat. Realizing throughout the season that making her character arc only about the racing wouldn't quite work, the studio decided on focusing on the psychological aspect of the athlete hitting his peak and not knowing where to go from there. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't really executed that well. If you really like the character designs of Kita-san Black and Satono Diamond, feel free to choose this as your first entry of the series, but I personally wouldn't recommend it to anyone else. Similarly to the previously mentioned OVA, Road to the Top is a rather short entry, clocking in at only 4 episodes, but where the B&W no Chikai focused on the slice of life aspect of the series, Road to the Top takes a very different approach. Cutting out most of the fluff, basically all of the focus lies on the sporting side of things, covering the rivalry and ambition that comes with such a cutthroat sport. However, while it is quite short, it still delivers an emotional impact and conveys the core themes of the series while making it very easily digestible for casual viewers. This entry is also where the animation quality really skyrockets, making for some of the best looking sports anime scenes I have ever seen. This is of course even more noticeable in the theatrical release of the movie Beginning of a New Era. While previous entries have had amazing scenes, some of the ones featured in the movie are genuinely breathtaking. If this series somehow came to your attention through some well animated shots you saw somewhere on the internet, chances are those scenes are from this movie. And although the themes of ego, humility, and finding your place among the competition are wonderful, there's only one big thing that differentiates it from Road to the Top. To be quite honest, these two entries are quite similar both in style and in quality, with Road to the Top having a slight edge in story and Beginning of a New Era having the edge in animation quality. So if you know that this high quality animation, sports focused approach to the series is your jam, but you have trouble deciding between which of the two you prefer, there's one simple way to find out. Which main cast do you prefer? On the one hand, you have Narita Top Road, a bright and energetic main character who always gives it her all, no matter the opposition. You also have Admire Vega, stoic loner who carries the burden of wanting to atone for her twin sister dying shortly after her birth. But the cast member that ultimately steals the show is TM Opera O. A self-absorbed, narcissistic opera queen, she constantly proclaims her greatness to others. Her attitude is backed up by facts, being one of the most decorated racehorses of all time. Additionally, she believes her beating her opponents at full power brings her more glory, so she always works on helping those around her achieve their full potential. On the other hand, you have Jungle Pocket, originally a troublemaker and leader of a group of ruffians, who later decides to become the strongest Uma after being enamored with Fuji Kisaki's performance on the racetrack. There's also Manhattan Cafe, a gloomy, mysterious girl who blends into the shadows and also talks with them. But there's once again a standout that steals the show, who just happens to be my favorite Uma of the entire series. Agnes Tachyon is as much a runner as she is a scientist. Pursuing speed with the power of science, she stops at nothing to quench her thirst for knowledge, even going so far as to experiment on living things and even herself if need be. So while my choice between the two is clear, in the end it's all up to you. The last entry on the list is probably the biggest departure from the regular format of the series. For one, Cinderella Grey isn't an anime original like all other seasons. It's actually adapted from a manga with the same title. Now, while that may seem insignificant at first, it helps create a season of anime that is very much unlike any other seasons of Uma Musume we have gotten so far. You see, every other entry so far is mostly focused on the peak that each particular horse has achieved. Having a different protagonist each season is one of the biggest strengths of the series, as it allowed the creators to explore different time periods within horsing race history. But it did come at a cost. Having a maximum of 13 episodes, sometimes even less, to focus on not only building up the main character but also the supporting cast and the plot at the same time really limits the type of story the studio is able to tell. And although they have managed it well so far, Cinderella Grey does offer a different kind of experience. With Core 2 of Season 1 already announced and more parts very likely on the way, it allows Psychems to flesh out the story of Ogre Cap much more than it did for many of the other protagonists. Instead of basically speedrunning the careers of some of the greats the sport has to offer, it allows him to tell Ogre Cap's full story from beginning to end, with all the ups and downs it encompasses. The story also presents a much more gritty, realistic view on the world of Uma Musume, moving away from the idealistic and idyllic world many of the other entries have to offer. So, if you've made it so far, or if you skipped ahead to get a quick rundown of which show you should start watching, here's a quick and dirty version of it. If you want the classic experience and a detailed introduction into the world of Uma Musume, or if you're planning to watch the entire series anyway, start with Season 1. If you want to experience a more slice of life side of the story, or if you just want a quick and short watch to sample the vibe of the series, watch the BMW no Chikai OVA. Season 2 is for those among you who love the character drama aspect towards anime, how top athletes deal with the psychological aspects of injuries, or if you simply love epic comeback stories. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Season 3 to be your first entry, however, if you love the design of the main characters or want to see the most modern version of the classic Uma Musume art style, then don't let me and my criticism of the season stop you. Both Road to the Top and Beginning of a New Era are perfect entries for you if you're someone that loves beautiful and breathtaking animation, with those two still being the prettiest entries to the series in terms of visuals. Both of them also feature some of my absolute favorite characters the series has to offer, with TM Opera O and Agnes Tachyon. And lastly, Cinderella Grey is for those who enjoy a more gritty and realistic story, but also a longer, more drawn out story that starts from the bottom and has the main character work their way up from there. To put a little bow at the end of the video, I'm honestly not only blown away by the content of the series itself, be it the game, anime or manga, but also the internet's reaction to it. For one, I never expected it to become this popular, and I didn't expect the reaction to it to be this positive. Naturally, there are people that just aren't interested in it, and that's totally fine. But from those that did give the franchise a fair shot, I've basically only seen positive reactions. I think Uma Musume is a really special franchise because it is not just fiction. It represents a part of real, actual sports history that I'm sure most that watch the show or play the game wouldn't have gotten to experience otherwise. So, if you do end up falling in love with the series, just like I did, make sure to check out the history of the real racehorses as well, because there are some gems of stories that just won't or can't be adapted. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like and comment. Thanks for watching.